Okay, so I'm just promising you now, we're not going to get a lot done in the text, but we're going to get a lot done because we touched upon it. We just touched upon it again. The Givonites have asked the Israelites to back them up. Yoshua gets the troops ready quite quickly, and then they have to go defeat the 5 kings. And in the midst of it, it says, again, we're in chapter 10, Perek Yud, Pasuk Yud Bet, verse 12, 10-12. Only a couple of psukim here, but there's a lot to cover here. There's really a lot to look at because of this miraculous thing that's just kind of thrown in, like, oh yeah, by the way, I can make the sun stop. Oh, okay. Uz Yidaber Yehoshua LaHashem. Whenever we see like the word uz, like we think of uz Yashir, we have a couple of times in Chumash, of course, the famous uz Yashir before Moshe does his miracle, or really it's actually afterwards. After the miracle of splitting the sea, we see uz Yashir Moshe. Az Yidaber Yehoshua LaHashem b'yom teis Hashem esamru lifnei b'nei Yisrael v'yomer le'nei Yisrael Shemesh Begivon dom v'yareich be'emek Ayalon. So then Yehoshua spoke to Hashem. Also, it's the very direct of Yehoshua speaking to Hashem. A very strong language. It's not Vayomer, it's Vayidaber. It's Yehoshua Yidaber la Hashem to Hashem. On the day that Hashem delivered the Amori before Bnei Yisrael, and he said in front of everyone, the sun will stand at Givon and the moon in the valley of Ayalon. Now, these are places that we're familiar with, of course. You talk about the Ayalon Darom, Ayalon Safon. We have I love hearing the traffic reports, Ad Mochlaf Maguardia, it's like, it's the whole kinds of, LaGuardia, okay, good, see, nothing's by accident. Vayidom HaShemesh v'yarech Amad, Ad Yikam Goy Oivav Halo Hiksuv al Sefer Yashar, Vayamod HaShemesh B'chatzei HaShamayim v'lo Atz Lo Kiyam Tamim, V'l'hoya Kayam Hu L'fanav Acharav L'shmoya Hashem B'kol Ish Ki Hashem L'cham L'Yisrael. The sun stood still, the moon stopped, until the people took retribution against the enemies. Is this not written in the book of the upright? Halohi Ksuv al Sefer Yashar. So the sun stood in the middle of the sky and didn't hasten to set for a whole day. There was no day like that before it or after it that Hashem heeded the voice of a man, for Hashem did battle for Israel. Okay, so, and then it's going to go on. We're going to talk about the rest of the battle, but we're not even getting close to that today. These are very unusual psukim. So, like, what jumps off right away? What? It's funny. I have you on Zoom, and I have 2 jet lag customers here. So you can't. You know what? If you're here, I have everything. This Yehoshua sort of commanding it to happen, and then the verse acknowledging that never before has Hashem listened to the voice of a man and said, oh, by the way, you're going to tell me what to do. This is what we're going to do. There's that. What is this Sefer HaYashar? Halo hi ktuva al Sefer HaYashar. We have Halo hi ktuva. We have that similar phrase in other places in Tanakh, but Sefer Yashar is only mentioned one other time in Shmuel Bet, I believe. And what happened here? Like the sun, well, why did the sun have to not set? Why?
כדי שיספיק להילחם, להרוג את כולם.
She says it's on her Hebrew sounds much better than mine,
לפעמים אני גם צריכה את זה.
You should become a Hebrew teacher. That's when she says shkoyach. The exactly that. Like we need it. Sometimes we need. Good morning. We need. Are you jet lagged?
No.
Good. We need.
I have a request. My 1-year-old great niece had a stroke.
Oh, you found.
So if for
What's her Hebrew name?
What?
What's her Hebrew name?
Eliana.
Eliana.
Necha.
Bas Rachel. We should dedicate our learning to Refuah Shalema. Absolutely.
Apparently the next thing is critical.
Oh, yeah. Sorry to hear that. The Yom Aroch we need a long day to do battle, to be able to conclude the battle, which is also interesting. Like, why do we? So I want to look at some of the mefarshim. I'm going to actually do some of this. Rabbi Hatton has this really intellectual sort of about the moons and stuff. But let's first look here. I'll put it on the screen for you, Mimi. Please to share the screens. Okay, you see it?
עוד לא. כן,
No?
כן,
Okay.
כן.
Okay, so here we have, right. So here, this is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah.
Mhm.
The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, oh, you know what? It didn't. All right. Well, you'll get an idea from the Gemara. It's not the entire Gemara. Those who say that the sages don't disagree over how much time elapsed, rather they disagree with regard to the additional time by which the day was extended. Shiur ben Levi said 24 hours were added to that day because the sun traveled 6 hours and stood 12 hours, and again traveled 6 hours and stood for another 12 hours, which meant that its standing lasted for an entire day. Rabbi Lazar said that the 36 hours were added. It traveled 6 hours and stood for 12 hours, then traveled for 6 hours, stood for 24 hours. This is like typical Gemara speak. Like, just tell me what you want to say, but that's how the Gemara works. Okay. With regard to the second suspension that the verse states, and hasten not to go down for an entire day. Okay, I'll have to admit someone in the room. Okay. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani said the time the sun stood in place was 48 hours in total. The sun traveled 6 hours and stood 24 hours, and then traveled another 6 hours and stood for another 24 hours. His reasoning is that the verse juxtaposes the sun's suspension to its motion, just as the sun is in motion for an entire day, so to its suspension was for an entire day. So the Gemara has a lot to say about this. And by the way, it's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah when it talks about people worshiping different things, et cetera, That's a lot. I mean, but the bottom line is that something out of the ordinary, something miraculous happens, and and it always begs the question: what's the miracle here? If you say the sun actually stood still, I guess that's a miracle. Or maybe the miracle is the victory of the battle, the fact that the Jews were able to actually keep their word, because the Gibeonites made them swear, even though it was under false pretenses, but they kept their word and they went to battle for the Gibeonites against these kings, and they were able to assail them. And you'll see the map that we have on the back here. We get to it in color yet, that it shows the route in which they were able to assail and take care of that. And again, the rest of the story about locking them in the cave and all that, that's coming up soon. But the fact is they were able to do it. So I want to share with you something from Rabbi Hatton. Again, this is a really good, a wonderful volume. This volume on Joshua is just tremendous. As you can see, I marked it up a little bit. So I'm going to just, I don't want to copy this whole thing for you, but I'm going to read it to you. So just sit back and relax and listen to my soporific voice, which has put many to sleep over the years. Though the sages are in disagreement concerning the length of time that the sun stood still, they do concur that it did in fact stand still, just as a straightforward reading of the text indicates. Now, by the way, you can imagine that in the time of the Chumash, or the time of Tanakh, or even in the time of the Gemara, people did not have access to worldwide travel like we have. Because you're such an experienced traveler, I'm sure you've seen white nights.
Well, fact is that we left Tokyo at 5:15 on Monday afternoon.
And you got here like the day
And
before?
we arrived in New York 5:15 Monday afternoon, after a 14-hour flight.
So time stood still for you.
Exactly.
It still
It
blows my
same
mind, by
thing.
the way. And people especially go to Australia, like you leave, you get back before you left. It's like,
Exactly.
and then when you're going there, of course, you get there like 9 days after you left. I don't know. But so these are, no, right. So this, it's very complicated with davening. It's very complicated with Shabbos.
Mhm.
People had a whole question, like when the Mir Yeshiva fled Europe and they went to Shanghai, there were many that kept 2 days of Shabbos for years, because they weren't sure which day was Shabbos. international dateline is always a huge question when it comes to, let's say, counting Omer, or if a woman has to count 7 days, things, whatever, all these types of things. There are no less. So I have at least 3 books that deal just with international dateline and halacha. And the first question that we have, what do you think the first question you have is with the rabbis? Where is the international dateline? There are some that include Hawaii in the international dateline. And is it here, is it there? And then all these different, of course, ramifications. So they didn't have that, but also, so the notion of time travel, that we could be on one side of the world in a few hours, is just, never occurred to them that could happen. But then also that there are places in certain areas where, if you go, I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever gone to Iceland in the summer or something like that? Where you've been?
Ken, in Shelley.
And there's no night, right?
No. Shelley knew 11:45 at night, we did Kiddush. She knew it.
Yeah, I'm saying, but it wasn't actually dark outside, right?
לא, מה פתאום? Because
Right.
השמש שוקעת וזורחת. זה היה אור יום מלא.
Yeah.
So that,
Light over
like,
there.
that could help us relate to this a little bit. I know, because they have these, it's a great shtick that they have in Iceland. There's like some famous golf course. You can play golf at 2:30 in the morning or something like that, like at a 2:30 a.m. tea time. I mean, but also when to make Kiddush, when to make Havdalah. Look, even in not so far-fetched places. I mean, if you're traveling in those parts in the summer, right now, let's say in London, Shabbos is over, I don't know, 10:30. That's already like, okay, I can get it. But so other places, and you go a little bit more north, Shabbos, people don't make Havdalah. They go to sleep and they make Havdalah when they wake up. And that's just kind of how it is. But then again, Friday night, you can have a, dinner and a show and this and that, and you come back and then you make Shabbos. So it's really weird. So anyway, that you have to take that into mind. So he says the ancients, everybody said that it did things. If so, the episode is not only highlights God's resounding intervention in the Israeli triumph, but also underscores the biblical axiom: God is a transcendent, all-powerful being who bends nature to his will. Okay, so we have seen it on occasion that God could say, okay, I'm going to make the sea split. I'm going to make the earth open up and swallow Korach. That's coming up soon. Or whatever these types of things. So why now? Why Yehoshua? Why this? That's always the questions we're going to ask. But here's where he gets into the whole thing about the ancients. Again, this is I always find fascinating because I know nothing about these things. And I know nothing about a lot of things, but this is just one of them. The ancients universally believed that the gods were powerful and mercurial beings, possessing in full measure the foibles of their human worshipers. So the notion that people would worship different types of gods, and the gods of the sun and the gods of the rain, that we've seen enough television that we can relate to that, especially when we talk about the Romans. They used to carry different idols and they would pray to the gods, etc. Okay. In their heavenly abode, they were primarily engaged in banal and sensual pursuits, or else bloody conflicts, in either case much resembling the goings-on down below on the terrestrial plane. So Mashkar Lamala, Kar Lamata, whatever they did, what they were doing in heaven, that's what's going on down here. The capriciousness of the gods derived in part from the fact that they too were subject to whims of fortune more powerful than they. Held in sway by fates that were beyond their control, the gods were often too feeble to intervene or to save. The sun, and to a lesser degree the moon, were regarded as gods by all polytheistic societies, many of whom venerated them as primary deities. So we know about the sun god of Ra, for instance. Re'u ki ra'a neged pneichem is one of the reasons they say in the pasuk, and when we're defeating Mitzrayim, ki ra'a, some say it's actually a reference to the god of Ra, and that was the god that they worshipped, the sun god. The cause for such singular devotion is not difficult to understand. The rhythms of daily life, the seasons of planting and harvest, the steady counting of days, months, and years are all dictated by the arc of the sun disk across the heavens, while the great and inexorable cycles of birth and death are mirrored by sunrise and sunset, spring and autumn. The cycle of the moon's renewal helped humans regulate their time, while its mysterious disappearance and reappearance instill a hope in resurrection. By the way, well, let me just finish this, then we'll comment. The new moon, reborn as an exquisite crescent, evoked the curving horns of the ox that pulled the plow, nurturing further associations of fertility and bounty. Now, you might read this and be like, yeah, these people are nuts. But have you ever seen Kiddush Levana? You ever see people do that every month, and they go outside and they look at the moon, they look for the moon, there's not a moon, it's cloudy, it's not cloudy, the moon, they make a whole prayer. We're very into the moon. We're very into the zodiac. the signs of the zodiac are very Jewish, and the scales of justice and the. If you look on Tisha B'Av, on the night of Tisha B'Av, we say very few elegies at nighttime, but the few that we say, the last one that we say at the nighttime is all about the zodiac and how the signs of the zodiac lined up against us on the night of Tisha B'Av, and that's why we have perennial bad luck on Tisha B'Av. So, like, I'm not saying I believe in horoscopes. I don't. I have a hard time with that because I can't believe that just because I was born in a time what makes me a Sagittarius, that's going to happen to me on that day. I have a hard time with that. And everybody who was born on that day has the same thing. I don't know. I don't know how it works. But the notion of heavenly signs, which, by the way, what are they called? The constellations and these signs, what are they called in Hebrew? What do we call them?
Mazalot.
Mazalot. Mazel. Oh, you have good mazel, luck. But mazel is the alignment of the planets, the constellations, the signs are sort of with you or against you. That's the notion of mazel. I always tell you, what's the real pshat of mazal? The real pshat of mazal is if you take the letters of mazal, it stands for three things. Makom, zman, lashon. Makom is place, zman is time, lashon is speech. If you're in the right place at the right time and you say the right thing, that's mazal.
Nachon.
Right?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks for coming. But we can't jump so quickly to criticize and say, oh yeah, the moon worshipers, like, that's nuts, that's crazy. Well, moon like a werewolves, woo, like, we do it. I'm not saying worship the moon, but we have something called Kiddush Levana. We have something called Fiat Hayarchi, which is we establish the calendar based on the appearance of the moon. And we look at the Jewish people are compared to the moon, waxing and waning and waxing, half moon, full moon, back, all those stages. That's all. Lots to say there. So here's where it gets. This is like already way above my pay grade. So thank you to Rabbi Michael Hatton for bringing this to my attention. I got to talk to him about this book when I go to Israel this summer. Shemesh was the female Canaanite version of the sun fetish. Because climactic conditions in Canaan yielded cloudy or stormy weather half of the year, or sometimes it's stormy even when it's not supposed to be stormy, right, Aline? And because the success of the crops was completely dependent upon sun-obscuring rainfall rather than upon irrigation, Shemesh never achieved the prominence accorded to the storm god Baal, or Baal's seductive cohort Ashtoret, the goddess of fertility and love. So we know Baal, we didn't get there yet, but in Tanakh, the Nevi'ei HaBaal, the worshippers of Baal were very, very powerful. The worshippers of the sun, not so much, but again, using the word Shemesh, okay? Baal was the head of the pantheon, while Shemesh was a lesser god. In Egypt, by way of contrast, the male sun god Ra was fervently and universally adored for his brilliant radiance in the perennially cloudless skies, nurtured the crops brought forth by the black alluvial fields watered by the Nile. There's a lot of words in that sentence that I would never use in like real life. Alluvial. Look that up. Ra was in fact regarded as the progenitor of Paro himself. That's why he portrayed himself as a god. But even in Canaan, Shemesh was a god to be respected and appeased, and scattered biblical references make it abundantly clear that sun worship was not at all foreign to the Canaanite landscape. And it gives you a bunch of sources here in Devarim, Perek Daled, Perek Zayin, Malachim Beis, Yecheskel, etc. The lowland town. Now, this is great. This is some I love. Again, we're all gonna become Israeli tour guides. Okay, there is a famous town that we all know in Israel, which was the center of sun worship in Canaanite times. There is a lowland town called Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh. So Beit Shemesh, by the way, is famous for a lot of things. There's actually an old sort of archaeological burial biblical site there. That's when, not far from that is where they had battles, but when the armies came to do battles, there was a big field right outside of Beit Shemesh. You can look at Tel Beit Shemesh, which is right outside the entrance to modern day Beit Shemesh. That's what was there. Okay. Please tell me, what does alluvial mean?
It's deriving from alluvium.
Alluvial, deriving from alluvium. Thank you. You're not supposed to define a word with that word. Okay, that's what
It's a deposit of clay.
Silt, okay,
Silt.
clay,
Sand.
silt,
Sand and
Sand.
gravel left by flowing streams in a river, valley, or delta, typically producing fertile soil.
okay, so fertile soil, alluvial, yeah, okay, alluvial, okay. You know, I'm gonna use that like in the next, like when I do a chuppah. May you have,
It could be the wordle word tomorrow.
yeah, if they make it longer,
Yeah.
right? I'll say, may you have an alluvial relationship. I have to see if I can pull that off. I gotta see, right?
Both still.
Yes, the Fertile Crescent. So, you know, okay, great. I like that. Anyway, what? Alluvial Crescent, right? You know, I don't think we use it. Let's make alluvial great again. We'll have red hats. They'll say, make alluvial great again. MAGA. No, did I just get canceled? Is that what? Yeah. Anyway, Beit Shemesh. The Beit Shemesh has a lot of history. Beit Shemesh now is known for one thing and one thing only, for being flooded with Americans, right?
There being friction.
It's gotten better, by the way. It's gotten a lot better. The mayor's done a great job there, and also that's right next door is the cemetery where Israelis can't get buried, only Americans, right? In Eretz Chaim, of which, of course, I plan to be a future resident. I already have my place there. My wife and I, we're so morbid with our family, like, because like, you know, this is what I deal with all the time, and my family's a part of it, whether they like it or not. So on a trip to Israel a couple of years ago, we took our family to visit our graves, and we took a picture on it. We took a selfie on our graves. This is where, you know, you'll see. Hopefully you'll come visit. I mean, that's what we do. When I went, it was a relatively new section, and because my wife's family are Kohanim, so it's a Kohen section, so it's on the edge. And I see like one freshly dug grave nearby. And of course, I'm going to go look. I want to see who my neighbor is going to be. I mean, you know, I'm going to make a noise at night. Like what? I could say that because people always talk about the view. So I look, and I almost like had to use the cemetery plot right away because it was my 8th grade Rebbe. My
Wow.
8th grade Rebbe, Rabbi Farber, Zichrono Livracha, and I'm thinking to myself, what in the world did he do wrong that he has to be stuck next to me? Right? Like what? Like what did he was such a righteous man. He spent time. Yeah, but he couldn't do it then. He's gonna do it now. Like anyway, this is really, I just love this when you learn the etymology, and especially as it applies to geography and why things are named the way they are. It's fascinating when you go places like you just did a tour. I'm sure you learned about places like, oh, I never realized that's why they called it, you know, Tokyo or whatever. You know, it means something in Japanese, right? And especially in Israel. So Beit Shemesh, because that was a place which was the center of sun worship. It's a high location, and it's kind of centrally located, which makes sense. Okay, even though it was called a lowland, they had a lowland part of it, but there's also a height of the mountain Beit Shemesh. The moon god Yerach, okay, was the companion of Shemesh. In the same way that Baal and Ashtoret were a mythical and licentious pair. Now that word I know, but again, it doesn't get used enough. So now, Beit Shemesh, if Shemesh is Beit Shemesh, what do you think Yerach's town is in Israel?
Sure.
יש בית ירח.
Correct, Yericho.
Oy.
Yericho. Yerach, Yericho.
No,
Which,
no.
when you come to about a million, you're like, oh, right, Yericho. I mean, we don't go to Yericho anymore because we can't. We can go, as Jews say, we can go by Yericho, or we can go around Yericho, okay? As the Battle of Begivon came to a close, the Israelite forces triumphant, Yehoshua called upon the sun and the moon to stand still in their tracks so that the people might avenge their foes. Miraculously, the celestial spheres complied, proclaiming with an astounding display that nothing was beyond the ability of the God of the Hebrews, completely incorporeal, absolutely powerful, of a perfect oneness, defying description. Israel's God, the God of heaven and earth, and all that they contain, demonstrated his, capital H, utter mastery over the forces of nature that all other peoples in Canaan and elsewhere submissively worshipped and irrationally feared. So taken together with the sudden downpour of hailstones that initiated the rout, perhaps the text here seeks to emphasize God's utter mastery over the most popular Canaanite gods. Thus, Baal, the storm god, bent to the will of the transcendent creator, while Shemesh and Yerach showed their devotion to him. How unlike their limited abilities was his omnipotence, his closeness and immediacy wholly distinct from their indifference and remoteness. Israel stood witness as the sun, moon, and whirlwind complied, like loyal servants obeying their master, ceasing their inexorable progress until released by the Creator to finally complete the course. Wow. It's a lot of writing. That's good writing, by the way. I appreciate good writing, right? One of my favorite writers, and again, you could disagree with her politics, but it's from writing point of view, Peggy Noonan. Peggy Noonan is a great writer. She's great. If you want to read something interesting, her biography of Ronald Reagan, really, really good, because just she's able to put words. She actually was his main speechwriter for most of his presidency, I think. But the way she could like string words together, it's a beautiful thing. You know, so how he went from Baal to Peggy Noonan, I don't know. The next I'm going to look at is the commentary of the Ralbag, but it's also to note. So I didn't know this also, but the Ralbag, of course, as we know, as found in Mikras Gedolos, is as one of the great commentaries in France in the 14th century. But he also, I didn't know this till reading from this Rabbi Hatton, that accomplished commentator and philosopher. He was an astronomer and a mathematician. A lot of these rabbis were astronomers, mathematicians. The Vilna Gaon wrote actually a book on geometry, mathematically. See, that's what he used to do when he was in the bathroom. Okay, my kids leave math so they can go to the bathroom, and they go to the bathroom and do anything but math. But okay, he was the inventor of Jacob's staff, a device that was used to measure the angular separation between celestial bodies, and that was the forerunner of the astrolabe. I don't know what that is. I guess it's something. Look it up. We got it. Astro, L-A-B-E. We got a lot of Googling here. This is good. I'm learning also. This is not, it's going to say, oh, it's a device to measure the angular separation between celestial bodies.
Yeah, that's basically what it
Yeah. His interpretation is a function of his scientific empiricism.
is. An ancient astronomical instrument that was a handheld model of the universe.
Hello?
Oh, I guess something like that. Or like the solar system thing you had to make.
Its various functions also make it an elaborate inclinometer.
Now we got to look up another word.
Analog calculation device capable of working out several kinds of problems in astronomy. In its simplest form, it is a metal disc with a pattern of wires, cutouts, and perforations that allow a user to calculate astronomical positions precisely. Historically used by astronomers, it is to measure the altitude above the horizon of a celestial body, day or night. It can be used to identify stars or planets, to determine local latitude given local time, and vice versa, to survey or triangulate. It was used in classical antiquity, the Islamic Golden Age, the European Middle Ages, and the Age of Discovery for all these purposes.
Wow.
You want to see a picture?
Yeah, I do want to see a picture. Oh, wow, that's just this. That's what it is. That's a picture of it.
Oh.
Okay. I think it looks like a Christmas tree decoration. I don't know. But yeah, it's got the ring, right? Yeah. Okay, but it's something that the space people use, the space guys use. Okay, we're gonna have a class trip to the Smithsonian, and we're gonna have to see. Okay. Anyway, so he and the Ralbag he invented something which was the forerunner to that. So that's pretty cool. So now I printed the whole thing, but let's kind of take a look here. The Ralbag on Yeshua. It's a long piece. Let's just see if we could just work through a little bit of it. Okay, you see it says Ralbag Yehoshua Yud. So bezos haparsha yesh sveikos rabos roi laya mehem. He says there are a lot of doubtful things here, because sometimes when people are such pragmatists and scientists, they have a hard time when you tell them, oh yeah, the earth stood still and the sun, all these types of miraculous events that are counter to the course of nature. What is nature, though? I mean, the fact that you woke up today, that's a miracle, is it not? Okay. Anyway, but that's a rabbi talking. Anyway, ha'echad hu shim haya shemesh amad ubatal mehatnuah hanirit lo hinei haya zeh hamofes yoser nifla le'ein shiur me'amofsim shenas alidei Moshe. He says, if the sun indeed stops its progress and holds still, he says, then this has got to be a bigger wonder than anything that Hashem ever did in the time of Moshe. Okay. V'zeki hamofsim ahem hayu b'shinu teva hanimtzos elu. Ela shiflas v'hu yoser nifla le'ein shiur. In other words, the fact that a celestial being can stop its progress is the greatest thing that could ever happen over those that are sort of subject to it, meaning we're at the mercy of the sun, the moon, et cetera, okay? Okay. Lishanos inyan siduram ki behem atzmam mechisaron haseder v'hayosher masha lo yalem v'chal hinize mamash mimash ein tzarich bir lemi she'ayin be'elo hamokos. He says, and this is something that's like so miraculous, so deep that, you know, maybe we it needs explanation, or we can't even possibly explain it. He says, "Kfar bi'arna zeh be'ofen shalem b'mispar b'sefer melchamos Hashem." He says, and I've already explained it elsewhere. V'imhaya ha'inyan ki hinei zeh soser ma she'amar ha'torah shelo kamna v'od b'Yisrael k'Moshe v'chol ha'osos v'mavasim asher asa Moshe le'nei kol Yisrael. There is the last verses of the Torah, when it says that no prophet has ever arisen in Israel like Moshe regarding all of the otot and moftim, osos and moftim, all his wonders and miracles that he was able to perform, okay? And if you're going to say that, wait a minute, how could it be that Yoshua did something greater than Moshe? It said, what Torah says, no one ever arose that did anything greater than Moshe. So, so then it must be that it happened. But if it happened, Ktsas Chazal, Hine Nisha Zasafek Beino. Kikfar Hayashav Yoshu Begadol, Shehamovsim Shanasam by Moshe Beino Olav Shalom. Imshim Haya Hainian Kain Hayroish Lotishta Katerm Lisap is Mofis and Iflas. So in other words, on the one hand, either he did a greater miracle than Moshe, or on the other hand, Moshe already did it, but then why wouldn't it have been mentioned? Why is it only mentioned here of Yeshua if Moshe had himself already done it? If it's saying that nobody did great, it means that at some point Moshe did something great like this. Ki anachnu nireh Chonat Torah parsema enyan hamofsim v'aniflos ki zeh mima shevo la'amin b'Hashem yisborach k'mo shenizkar b'Torah b'inyan hamofsim shenas l'paro u'laman tesaper ba'oznei b'nchla, etc. In other words, what's the point of miracles? What is the point of nature stopping and l'mala min hateva taking over? It's like we saw with the plagues in the beginning of Parshas Va'era and Parshas Bo, etc. So you'll be able to remember. By the way, look what God did. When somebody messes with the Jews, look what God did. It's to create and to engender emunah, faith among the people. Okay, and then v'yidatem ki anei Hashem, and then you'll recognize who's the true God. V'o ki kvar yir mi pashtei elu hadvarim shelo nisbatel hashemesh matnu evelo yerech v'zeh yisper mipnim mifnim mehem ma she'amar v'lo atzlavo ratzlomer shalom meher lavo v'zeh lo yishlom mimenu hatnua. He says also, we're not going to. He has a hard time wrapping his head around the fact that saying that the entire sun like went out of its drama. V'kamo elam amar mahashleim ashidu b'hem hadvarim miderech mahu umehem ma she'amar shemesh begivon dom v'yirech b'malach elon v'lo amar shemesh dom v'yirech v'aval lakach mehem makom rachav hayinira az el hamakam hahu. He says, look at the way that the pasuk is formulated. It says shemesh begivon dom. It doesn't say shemesh dom v'yareach, but it has like a whole sort of like flowery language to it. Okay. He says the reason why we have to take this very line, kikfar efshar shitanoa b'makom rachav hahu, ukfar yechayev zeh hamamar bekama mamar hashleimim l'shemesh l'reach hatunah v'amashal shemishi yomer sheploni amad ba'artzo kach v'kach yomim. He says, let's look at the following example. We'd say so and so stood in his land, he stood in his place a certain amount of days. All we know from this is that he stayed put. He didn't leave. He didn't leave the country. He didn't travel anywhere. But it could be that maybe within his own land, maybe he did wander around. Right? So if you're going to say that he stayed put, you'd have to say it didn't move anywhere, as opposed to saying it stayed in its place. Staying in its place means, but I could still wander around within my place, or I froze, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to just scroll down a little bit towards the end of this. It's a very, very, very long piece. So on the page, if you go already to page 3, go to page 3 on this handout. I'm already here on the, let me just see how many lines up. It's, let's say 3, 6, 9, like 10 lines from the bottom here. 3, 6, 9, 10 here. He says, Hinei nashuv leva'er divrei zos haparsha, ve'omer, Shema Mar Yeshua hayasheterem sheyasar hashemesh miyos al Givon v'hayarech miyos al emek Ayalon. The pasuk is telling us that before the sun left or ceased from being over Givon and the moon on the valley of Ayalon, to Shalem Nikmas Goy Oivav, that Hashem is going to conclude and the Jewish people will complete their vengeance on their enemies. Aval Katzar HaKosav Bazeh, the pasuk, however, abbreviates V'yor al zeh ma she'omar acharav vayidom hashemesh v'yarech amad ad yakum Goy Oivav, and to say that the Shemesh stopped, the moon came until all the vengeance was taken. To tell us that the Shemesh already stood place in Givon, and the moon in Ayalon, and he says, and that's the miracle of this. It's not enough to say that they were able to actually achieve victory or vengeance over their enemies. But it's trying to stress to us they were able to do it in such a short period of time. And that's what never happened from now until future, is that such a quick and decisive victory took place. In other words, as if the sun had stood still and the moon didn't go, etc. That's how quick they were able to achieve this victory. Okay, Ki Hashem nilcham b'Yisrael, and this is because of the help of Hashem that they were able to achieve victory in such a short time. Because the great hand of Hashem can never be underestimated. Hashem, and you have to listen to God. Hashem listened and said that we need a quick and decisive victory. And so it could be like what some suggest is that and I'll read the way he writes it. We don't need God to intervene in the halt the motion of the sun if the matter was for Israel to achieve victory. After all, they could well accomplish that aim without recourse to such an overt display of divine prowess. At the same time, the text makes no mention of a didactic or pedagogic aspect of the episode, and instead casts the matter in a purely utilitarian light. Hashem interceded that Israel might militarily prevail, not that they may come to appreciate some abstract truth about his governance of the world. To Gesund. Rabag would not accept our earlier reading that detected in the event a rebuttal of polytheistic beliefs concerning the divinity of the sun god, the moon god, and the many. It's not about that. It's about Hashem created a miracle or a miraculous state, that would seem, so that they could achieve a quick and decisive victory, so that people understand that the Jews are here and they mean business. Okay, so much more like sort of rational approach. Again, nobody's disputing the fact that, because as the Gemara said, that there were different courses of nature, 24 hours, 36 hours, whatever it might be. When we go forward, hold on to this, because when we go forward, you're going to see this map, because it just gives you an idea. And this map in the bottom, which is in color, again, the red is the Israelite route, but look how far they have to accomplish. We're going to see in the Pesukim going forward, but it's a big swath of land. This is not a small area. When you talk about it in the span of a day, okay, and how this has to happen, and maybe that's why we need such a longer day. But we'll see those Pesukim, because a lot more happens. Again, lots of names and places, but the cave, et cetera, that happens going forward. I want to just say, we'll just say a Perek of Tehillim and a Misha Beirach. Is that okay? I'll just say a Perek to him. Shir Amalas Mimama Kim Karasicho Adonai Adonai Shema Bekali Tiena Zecha Kashavos Kotach Adonai Im avanos tishmari Adonai miyamod ki mechas licha lama'an tivarei kvisi Adonai kivason nafshi liveroho chalti nafshi Adonai mishamrim laboker shamrim laboker yachel Yisrael el Adonai kim Adonai achesed v'harbe imo fidus v'hu yifta es Yisrael mikol avonosav Misha berach avosayim Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Moshe Aharon David Shlomo Baruch Rabbi Satun Tchinik Achola, the name again Eliana Necha Bas Racha Bavur Shakolim Miswan Bavur Beschai Zakarish Baruch Hu Melech Rachim Melech Lahachti Mel Rapasol Lahachti Kablach Yosaf Vishlach Lam Meheira Refushlam Ramach Everech Shistagi De Besel Shar Chol Yosef Fosaguf Hashta Bagalovas Mankriv and Amar. You should have a Okay, we'll God willing continue. I think next week we're still here. Yeah, next week we should still be on, and yeah, so we should share good news.
Amen.
Okay.